Welcome to Resilience and Renewal in your third act, a free online event featuring inspiring thought leaders and visionaries who can help you re-envision a life of fortitude and grace. Share this event with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Sabrina Chaw.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to introduce you to Clare Dubois. Clare is the founder of treesisters.org, a global women's movement supporting humanity's evolution into a restorer species. She is an earth-loving social entrepreneur and inspirational speaker known for her direct catalytic energy, her whole systems approach to behavior change, and her unending loyalty and love for the natural world. Clare, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Oh, yes. Well, you being here, Clare, I think is so necessary, especially during these times. We are in unprecedented radical times, and I saw a video of you at an eco-psychology conference in 2019 where you were talking about that we are really in radical times, and yet the most radical is yet to come, and they will most likely come within the next 5 years. And here we are, 1 year later. You were prophetic in what you said. So I'm curious, what were you feeling, thinking back then that you knew somehow instinctually that we were going to come upon some radical times?
Well, it was part intuition and part actually guided by a large group of indigenous leaders who gathered in Kauai in 2017. And they came from all over the world, like South Africa and Iceland and, the Russian continent. And they were a very disparate group that had never been together. And they discovered that they were all holding the same timeline. They were all holding 2026 as the point beyond which they could see no further. And what they saw before that was cataclysmic climate change. And when I heard that news, I started reaching out to people and basically saying, what do you see? What is coming? And there was a very interesting answer. They couldn't see beyond, and they didn't know whether that was because there was something so radical that actually happened, or whether or not the veil was not being allowed to be open because that was needed for us to be in a sufficiently potent crucible of transformation that we could shift a corner. Now, that was one thing that I've been holding, and I knew about that in 2019, but also in my own body, as an environmental leader. I'm sitting here in the forest in California. Many of the trees are dying. We're watching the sixth great extinction. We're watching the burning of the Amazon. We're watching a way of being on this planet that is essentially anti-life. And yet we are life. We are life. We are nature. There is no separation between us and it. There's just a perceived separation. And that perceived separation is allowing us to do monstrous things and then not even be able to really feel the consequences. So I don't believe that life is going to allow us indefinitely to continue doing that. So life would create the circumstances for our awakening, because part of that awakening is the nature of ourselves, waking up to ourselves as nature. And it sounds so simple, but it's not, because we are so profoundly conditioned away from who and what we really are. So I've kind of been waiting for something. I wasn't imagining a pandemic, even though, right now we've got corpses defrosting in the Arctic that are carrying anthrax, that are carrying diseases that haven't been around for an awful long time. So the circumstances that we find ourselves in on multiple levels are, pandemic friendly. I just imagined that the thing that would, if something was to cause a major wake up the way this just had, it would be climate change. But actually, climate change seems to be too existential, too out there, not personal enough. But a pandemic and the possibility of our social interactions killing us, that seemed to be enough to shut us down. And what that's actually done is it's shown us that we can actually change on a dime. And so that's an incredibly powerful moment. But I think anybody that's actually tuned in to what's happening globally is aware that unless we significantly do a 180 within the next 5 years, we're just going to go off a cliff. And so what that looks like, that's up to life. Or how we do that, how we rise to the challenge, that's up to humanity. But it's before 2026. By the time 2026 comes, we will have needed to have radically changed. And so that's what I was speaking to when you heard me.
Wow, that really provokes a fervency in the timeline and what in our actions and what we're doing now. Let me ask you, Claire, because we have taken a giant pause in the last 2 months with the shelter in place, and pollution has decreased a lot. Animals are coming out. There's so much that is being nourished now, more than what we have been doing before the lockdown, and yet human habit is hard to change. So what can we do, as we're now coming out of the lockdown, where, most people are just kind of going back to, whatever they're doing. There needs to be not only an education, but a heartfelt experience in our own souls to be able to come back to a greater lesson, to not just continue what we were doing before, go back to the old normal, but to create a new normal. What do you think we need to do, especially because you teach feminine, nature-based leadership? What do we need to do to really get that hit that we need to get to really change ourselves from the inside out?
Well, it's going to be different for everyone. And what I hope is that for many, something will already have changed. It's that during lockdown, we were confronted enough, or we were reflective enough, or we were uncomfortable enough, or we were slow enough to actually feel how we've been living has been running over the top of our own bodies and our own wisdom. When the whole planet stops and we get to see the changes that happen as a result of that, I don't think we are ever going to be able to go back. There's going to be the world before COVID and the world after COVID, because awareness has grown. Awareness has grown. Awareness of ourselves, awareness of each other, awareness of nature. And so in a way, you could say the train has already left the station. It's never going back to the platform that it left from. We can't go back to being that shape that we were. Our shape has changed. Now, is it sufficient in 2 months or 3 months in order for us to flip the global economy into a restorative or a regenerative economy? No, it's not. But during that time, I was seeing, like the head of the UN coming out saying we can't go back to business as usual. There's been significant leadership around the world saying we can't go back to business as usual. So we don't have the new systems in place to nurture a new way into being, but seeds have been planted during the quiet. And I think the real question is, how are we going to water those seeds? How are we going to ensure that we don't go back to normal? Now, when you're talking about momentum, I sometimes think about when I was 11 years old, I was in a swimming lesson, and they asked us to all go to the edge of the swimming pool and start walking around all in the same direction. And to begin with, you're trying to push against, inertia. And then slowly the water starts to take you. And then after a while, the water is stronger than you are. And so stopping is really difficult. And I remember at the time, even at 11 years old, just going, oh my God, this is collective consciousness. And then they said, okay, now try and stop the water. And we were clinging onto the side of the swimming pool. And everybody's like banging onto you as you go past, just going, oh, get out of the way. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with what I call consumer consciousness. We're even called consumers. Our whole world is that swiftly moving water around the swimming pool of collective momentum. And so those of us that are sort of clinging onto the side of the swimming pool going, hang on a minute, we've got to stop this flow. And not, more than that, we've got to reverse it. We've got to go from consumption at all costs to life to restoration on behalf of life. To begin with, people are banging on you. And a lot of those people are just really wanting it to go back to the way it was, because that's what we know. And humans don't like change, and it's uncomfortable, and we don't like the unknown. And we also don't want to look at the fact that that momentum that we've been on has actually been anti-life and destructive towards life and destructive to our children and all species. But we're going to have to. But part of the process, I believe, is having sufficient compassion for the parts of ourselves that simultaneously want it to go back to normal because it's comfortable, and the parts of ourselves that are awake enough to recognize that normal is killing our world. It's threatening the future of our survival of all species, but humanity as well. And that perhaps if you're alive now, if you've chosen to incarnate now, you've got something unique to bring to the party. There's something that you have got inside you that is relevant to the unfolding. The unfolding right now is, can humanity change its story? Can humanity change its identity? Can humanity change its path? Well, if patriarchy has been the root cause of climate change, which it has, because patriarchy is a state of dominance over nature. It's a state of dominance over the feminine, dominance over life. It's looking at life as a mechanism within which to create superficial wealth. It's not looking at life as a interconnected web of brilliance that holds us all and that we are in intimate relationship with. In order for patriarchal systems or patriarchal consciousness to shift, we need to bring in the healthy feminine that is not requiring masculine permission in order to bring her gifts. She is rising because life is rising on behalf of itself. And with that, can the unique consciousness and wiring of women, when we are in a connected state, can that also rise and bring with it solutions and awareness and consciousness and leadership that can start to tip the balance? It's not about women are better than men or the feminine is better than the masculine. It's about the two are an interconnected whole. The feminine brings the receptive, intuitive, relational, felt experience of being part of, that the masculine then responds to so that he can grow and build and strategize and create systems that serve life into its fullness. So the two are absolutely sacred, absolutely indivisible from each other. But one is not superior to the other. They are a working pair. So right now we stand at this gateway of, can women remember who and what we are? Can we drop into the nature of our bodies? Can we remember that we are more than we've been conditioned with? And can we bring a different kind of intelligence and leadership to the world that helps the masculine recognize that the systems that it's been, the men of our world have inherited this flawed system. It's not like they're the creators of it. We've all inherited the imbalance. Now, what are we actually going to do about it? Because unless there's a significant values shift on this planet and we start valuing life over money, we're going to go over the edge. And I just don't think that's our destiny. And one of the reasons I don't think it is because I don't believe the feminine would rise as a last gasp before it all falls over. I just don't think that is what the intelligence of the feminine would do. I believe that she would rise when there is still time, when there is still hope. And she's looking at all of us to allow her to come through and create systems that actually sustain life.
Wow. That is so true, so inspiring, Claire. And also, again, I feel this sense of urgency to really light a fire under us to really get going, because we don't have that much time. My question is then, how do we really light this fire? I think we get conceptually how much we need to make this massive shift. And there's the institutions that we have now are so monolithic. right? And we've been ingrained in our brains to be consumers and to not respect nature in the way, and not just respect, but know that we are nature in the ways that you're talking about. So how do we individually, first of all, let's just start there, sort of light that fire under us, and actually also not just through fear, right? Because we don't want to just go through fear, but also bring on practices for ourselves where we actually feel the embodiment of nature in us and actually feel the relationship we have with her so that we get it. It's like, oh, it's not just up here, it's like in me. What can we do on an individual level? And then let's talk about what we can do on a collective level as well.
Well, inside Tree Sisters on our website, you will find a grow page, Grow Yourself. And in that grow page, there are so many meditations, so many tools where you can lean into a guided experience of moving into interconnection with nature. The interesting thing is that we are nature, and those words, okay, we are nature. Okay, so I'm no different now. I've heard those words than I was 3 seconds ago, but we have oceans and rain and rivers in our blood. We're made of the rocks and the grass and the beasts of this planet. We have stardusts in our cells. We have the cosmos in between our protons and neutrons and electrons. It's like we are made of the fabric of this planet, and we are made of the consciousness that is creating all things. That means we are actually only as limited as we can open our minds to allow for the more that is creation to pour into ourselves. And to me, that is incredibly liberating. Once I understand that how I use my mind literally dictates my experience, then I can understand that my conditioning is not who and what I am. When it comes to lighting a fire, I think it's very difficult to try and just suddenly sort of generate energy out of nowhere. I'm just running a course at the moment, and it's called The Courage to Shine. And in it, basically what I'm talking about is that your soul is like a river, and that river is pure and whole and complete, and it's got everything that you are. But if you feel like you're living a half-life, it's because somewhere along the line you've dammed that river up, and that river has been dammed up in experiences of being shamed or rejected or abandoned or hurt or abused or whatever it is, where we've interpreted experiences to mean that we're less than. And when we believe on some level that we're less than, then we tend to lock up our life force and hold it down, and then try and avoid parts of ourselves that we associate with pain. And how that can manifest in our lives is that we feel like we're living a half-life. And it may seem like an odd answer to your question, but my strongest knowing is that action arises out of honesty. First of all, we need to be honest with ourselves. Are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Beyond maybe the sort of superficial trappings of your life, does your soul feel like it's given? Do you feel like you really understand what love is? Do you really feel that you're in the deepest level of communion with your own purpose? Because in some ways, if we're just numb and apathetic, or we're just watching life go by and we're okay, we can do that. And then we get to watch climate change, and we get to watch the children striking, and we get to watch polar bears falling off dwindling ice and starving, and we get to watch, all this news. And if you're completely numb, is that enough for you? Is it enough? Or do you know that there's more inside you that's wanting to be lived? Because for me, the gateway into my action, my activism, my passion, my courage has always come through grief. It's come through my willingness to feel what's missing, where I'm held back, where my river is dammed, where I feel impotent, or where I feel incapable of bringing my voice when I want to bring my voice, or saying no when I really mean no, or saying yes when I really mean yes. The willingness to be honest about how we actually are, to me, is the gateway through to action. And that can also be, are we taking any action around climate change? Are we actually satisfied with that? Are we believing that if the world is in absolute peril as it is, and if our children do not have a safe future, which they don't, if our grandchildren have completely uncertain futures right now, God only knows what they're going to be facing, is that enough of a legacy? Again, it comes to, can we pull our minds out of the humdrum of business as usual into, okay, what's the reality that we're in right now, and what's my response? And if my response is held back, why is it held back? And am I satisfied with being held back? And if we're not, then for me, it's following your longings down to where they want to take you. Your longings, I feel, always point to your soul, to what you're here for. And if there's an unmet longing, there's an instinctual knowledge that something is unmet, is unlived, is its voice is rising. And so following our longings, acknowledging our feelings, being honest about where we're held back, what we're doing, what we're not doing, how responsible we're actually being, then, you can watch some amazing films. You can watch, there was a film in 2000, when was it? It was a long time ago, The Age of Stupid. That film changed my life. There are other films that change other people's lives that can actually help you get real. But again, you've got to want to get real. And so in that, to me, it's about reframing things so that you can understand, okay, if you're in a state of apathy or impotence because you're afraid or overwhelmed, like I can't take any more, which a lot of people are at the moment, especially those who are having to suddenly self-parent at home, who are having to deal with things that they never had to deal with before. They're completely overwhelmed. As we come out of that, we're moving into what I call an era of radical permission, because suddenly we get to live the most meaningful lives that we've ever lived. No generations before us have faced the potential demise of life on their planet, or the permission, the wild permission that gives all of us to tap into our gifts and bring our brilliance and have a go. We're just about to pass 10 million trees, or we have just passed 10 million trees, but they're not quite all in the ground yet. Did I have a clue what I was doing at the beginning of Tree Sisters? No, I didn't know. All I knew was that my world was in peril and I couldn't bear to let it go without giving it my all. I just knew I had to do something. And I started this on a wing and a prayer, with no background, no finance, no experience, no nothing, just knowing that I had to do something in order to live with myself, and that I needed to die knowing that every breath in my body had been given to the creation of a world that made sense to my heart. Whether I succeed or not is irrelevant. It's the fact of letting that longing take me. And that's the gateway that's available to all of us right now. Will you let your longings take you into a life that is profoundly meaningful on behalf of the future that makes sense to your heart?
Well, I think you just said the key right there, Claire. The key to your heart, and really touching upon our longing. I know you mentioned before that only 3% of global giving actually goes towards women and the environment, and most money is given to those things that basically take away life, as you mentioned, the domination culture you were mentioning. So, and you mentioned that we're on a systemic lack of self-love by the systems that we have are taking on right now. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because there's a lot of ways to acquire self-love, through therapy, through many other modalities, and they're all great. But you're talking about something else. How do we really acquire that potent self-love through our relationship with nature?
Gosh, it's a really hard question to answer, because there's no recipe. There's no take step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you're going to discover that you belong. I had a very strange experience. I mean, I've if you think about it as levels of consciousness or vibrational bands, then as our consciousness moves between those frequencies, we will have different awarenesses. It's like a light bulb that as you lift it in a room, it sheds more light. There's levels of consciousness which are in a state of perpetual interconnectedness. There is no separation. And when you touch those, you experience those. So can we turn ourselves into that thing? Well, we already are that thing. It's impossible for us to be indivisible. It's impossible for us to be separate. It's just what our mind has done has created that illusion, and then we've built systems that hold that illusion in place. So finding practices that shift your state of mind is core. And there are some like little tools in there. Like one of the things that I often say to people is, can you forget that you're a human being at the moment? Can you see if you can drop that you know anything about yourself at all? Can you experience yourself as a profound mystery that you have no answers for? Can you become utterly curious from that place? Because when you're curious, you're open and that closed-mindedness is gone. Can you take yourself out into nature, and can you start to extend your awareness to the natural world? Can you begin to feel that the natural world is actually aware of you? Can you start to open your awareness to an awareness that is so much greater, that has never seen you as separate? And can you experience some humility in that state? And there are many different practices out there that can help you change your state, but what works for an individual is going to be completely unique to that individual. And when it comes to falling in love with ourselves, it's even harder, because the majority of us have so internalized different levels of rejection in our lives, and we've rejected ourselves in the process. So it's like where most of us find it very easy to love other people, somehow it becomes incredibly difficult to love ourselves. And so I think it may sound again like in the same way that I'm saying longing is a way into action. Self-acceptance is the single greatest tool that I know to bring ourselves back into our hearts, via the path of radical compassion. And people are so afraid that to accept ourselves mean that I find myself acceptable. And I'm not saying acceptance in as much as liking, but I'm saying while we resist aspects of ourselves, we perpetuate them. And when we accept them, something can fall open and change can happen. So again, it's like how we hold our mind. If we hold our mind in judgment of ourselves, others, or the natural world, or the world as it is, we are holding a barrier of separation. But if we can open and accept everything as it is, suddenly it becomes available to us. We're in relationship with it. We're not resisting it. And in that more available state of not knowing, then life can move into us and start providing us with intuitions or instincts or felt knowing. And I think life is always on our side. I think life is always wanting to move into greater intimacy with us. I think the whole mess of our world is essentially lack of intimacy with life. If we were intimate, we couldn't harm. If we were intimate, we would love and protect and revere. So how have we lost our intimacy? That intimacy feels like the overarching mother wound, like the disconnection from the natural world that is our everything. And coming back into that felt sense of connection brings with it a profound sense of belonging. And I was just about to say, when I started this section of what I'm talking about, was I was thrown out of the American embassy in London about 6 years ago by men with guns, which I'm just not used to. We don't do guns in England. And I'd been trying to get my visa to get over here, and they had refused me, and I tried to question them, and they'd basically marched me out of the embassy with guns. And I was so traumatized by that experience, I couldn't walk for 2 days. I was in bed, crying like a lunatic, feeling as if patriarchy had just basically damned me to its own version of what my life had to be. And the wound was so complete in terms of hitting what felt like every fear in my body around being dominated, that somehow it flipped and my consciousness shifted into everything that wasn't that. It shifted into a radical state of interconnectedness. And I became nature, and I stayed there for 9 days. And during that 9 days, if you'd tried to tell me that there even was something called insecurity, I would have told you were mad. I had none of the normal human neuroticisms available to me because I was woven into the fabric of everything, and therefore I belonged. I absolutely belonged. There was no place for any insecurity. And in that belonging, the power of the universe was available to me. Did I have any desire to wield it? No, there was no desire for power over. There was just this feeling of intimacy. And in that place of intimacy, then I could start looking at my organization, my life, and figuring out what did I need to put in place to draw things into that channel. Now, I have no idea how to even have that experience again or how to create it for people. But I do know that that is a felt truth. It's a vibrational band that we can find our way into. And there are ways of helping ourselves get closer to it. And one of those things is understanding that our version of reality is a very, very limited version of reality. That when we think we're alone, we're not. We can never be alone. There is no such thing as alone, not in a fully conscious world. And that the schism that we've inherited is a lie. And so again, our longings will pull us back to that deepest desire to belong. But we may think we're supposed to belong to a man, or belong to our family or belong to a community. Yes, maybe. And it's so much more. We belong to life. We are life. Life is trying always to draw us home into deepest intimacy with what it is, so that we can start to live in ways that just perpetually deepen that sense of felt intimacy and restore and protect everything that we treasure and love.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I really appreciate about what you just said, Claire, is that really feeling in the moment, like not just dropping our insecurities, dropping the past, basically, and really coming into this radical moment of honesty with ourselves and really touching upon our longing. This is why you say, like, to go from radical bullshit to radical truth, is that you're talking about what the truth really is and what we're about. And I know we don't have a lot more time, but is there any way that you can touch upon the 5 points in your feminine, nature-based leadership? The 5 components that we can help understand it more by you describing that.
Gosh, I will try. It's hard without actually having the visual of it. But so the 5 choices of Tree Sisters are a value system that is rooted in what I call 5-element acupuncture, but for consciousness. And it starts with truth. It starts with the word that came when I was first given it was consideration, but that's a really difficult word to get your head around. A word that we've landed on these days is reveal. And reveal I love because it basically puts the mind in a receptive state to say, show me, life, show me. What is the truth? What is my relationship as a human being to the natural world? What is a human being in itself actually for? Like, who am I? So this is the open-minded state that is willing to receive reality as it is. So in our world, we have a reality that our species, for whatever reason, has been at the effect of patriarchy and is now seriously looking at that and wondering whether it's a good idea. And we've created climate change as the crucible of our awakening and the rising of the feminine. So that's one version of what we're facing right now. That's the truth of our situation. Another truth is we have absolutely no idea what we are and what we're capable of. None. And that's where holding yourself open as a mystery allows for the more that we possibly are, or the more that the cosmos wants to bring through us to come through us. The second place is the place of encouragement. On our map, it's the left arm. It's the in-breath of the heart. It's valuing our need for and capacity to love. It's the place of unity, community, belonging. It's who we are when we open our heart to each other rather than compete with each other. And so it's the place of who we become with an open heart, as if everybody else also matters. The third place on this mandala is the left leg, which is the place of intimacy with nature. It's also called embody in our map. It's the recognition that we are indivisible, inseparable, that our root is earth. As women, that our womb is the same as the planet, that, the planet is a womb, and that women and nature actually are birthing life as it is. But this is just as relevant to men. There's not a man around here that isn't also the planet walking around. We're all made of that stuff. So then if we're made of her, we can listen to her through the cells of our body, because every atom of us has arisen out of the earth. We are her intelligence. Now, those first three, like the ability to have an open mind, an open heart, and an open body, that's the feminine principle. And those three aspects of ourselves enable us to have profound felt relationship with what is, ourselves, each other, and the planet. Out of that arises then the possibility for the first masculine principle, the right leg, which is the responsibility or our ability to respond to what our mind is receiving from life, our heart is feeling from life, and our body is instinctually receiving. So then responsibility is how we live in relationship to self, other, and nature as sacred. How do we live as if self, other, and nature is sacred? Because it's not how we're living right now. So there's all the behavior changes that need to happen in order to bring us into integrity with life. As we come into integrity with life and into integrity with ourselves, that's also the place of holding boundaries, knowing what is true for you in your life in relationship to your relationships and your body and your work. As we say yes to what is appropriate and creates health and balance and well-being, so we are then we have more energy to feel for what our hearts actually want to do. And that's the final of the fifth choices. It's the place of courage, the rage of the heart, courage. It's the place of our love made visible. It's our gifts given. It's our service. It's our purpose. It's our creativity. It's our activism. It's who are you and what is your unique gift to bring to the world? And can that gift contribute to the awakening, to the coming together, to the reconnecting to the planet, to the shifting of our human behavior? So it's a virtuous circle of choices that build on each other, where the masculine principle of action is bowing to the feminine principle of feeling and relation. And together, the two things create a whole version of a human being who has an opportunity to live the life that your heart and soul is longing for you to live on behalf of the creation of a world that gives our children and the children of all species a future. So those are the 5 choices.
Well, you did a beautiful job in recollecting those 5 foundational components, Claire. I really appreciate that.
I hope that made sense. I hope it made sense, and I hope it feels relevant. And so the interesting thing about it, when you look at the map, which you can't right now, but it's a 5-pointed star, and each part is related to all the other parts. And so when you find an area where we're weak, so say the right leg and responsibility is weak, we're looking at our world and we're saying, okay, we know we're in trouble, but why aren't we taking action? Rather than beating yourself up for why am I not taking action, you look for where's the energy held back. Well, what feeds responsibility is intimacy. Okay, well, if our world is disconnected and not in a state of intimacy, it's not getting its fuel. That's where we get our energy. That's our plug-in. So if that's empty, there's very little energy in the pot for taking action and making change. Similarly, there's a line from the left arm to the right leg, which is from encouragement to responsibility. That's community, that's togetherness, that's that deep sense of safety and solidarity. If you don't have that in your life, if you're not emotionally supported, it's also really hard to create change. So actually, one of the uniqueness about Tree Sisters is we don't just say, go and make change, go and plant trees, go and be active. We say, what's in the way? What do you need to do in order to feel suitably strengthened in order to be able to make action? And usually what that is you need to fill up on the empty feminine side. You need to fall back in love with the mystery of what it means to be human. You need to find community that soothes your soul and that helps you know who you are and to whom you belong and feel supported with. And then you need to bring practices into your life that strengthen your root, your deep root and connection to your body as the source of your knowing. When those three components are in place, the fourth starts to feel possible. So it's like attend to yourself, nurture yourself, fill yourself up, find your support systems, and then try and make the action that's going to make the difference in the world. Don't try and bring your uniqueness in some great big gesture if you don't have enough reinforcement in place to hold you, because what you'll do is burn out, and that's what we're doing to our planet. We're burning out our planet and we're burning out ourselves. So it's a game change that's needed for ourselves to really resource, really plug in, deeply nourish ourselves, and only take action from fullness when we're ready and sufficiently supported.
Wow. Well, thank you for connecting all the dots and giving us your passionate message about how this is all interconnected, Claire. I mean, I wish I had more hours to ask you more and more questions to sort of break down and tease out what you just covered, but I know we're running out of time. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience before we leave?
I just want every woman here to understand that any thoughts that you have about yourself that are other than you are sacred, worthy, lovable, beautiful, brilliant, is basically a lie. If you think that you are as sacred as you are the day you were born, the day that the universe breathed out your soul, there is no part of you that is not as sacred as the sky, as the mountains, as the lakes, as the oceans. And that sacredness that you are is the fundamental truth, and it's ringing all the time, waiting for you to hear it. And if you can let yourself hear it, if you can lean back into the truth of your own nature as absolutely sacred and indivisible from nature, then all the conditioning and all the crap that we tell ourselves about ourselves and that is bedded down in our nervous systems, it can fall away, because it's not who we are. And who we really are, it's time for that part of us to start emerging. And it doesn't require anybody's permission. It doesn't require anybody to understand us. It doesn't require anybody to even agree with us. It's your unique note. It's your unique offering. It's the absolute beauty that only you are, that is the composite of your whole life's experience, that is waiting to be offered now in its uniqueness to the world. And all I want to say is, don't wait too long before you bring it, because we need you as you are, exactly how you are, just opening to the understanding that what you are is wanted, valuable, needed, and perfect for this time in history. And lastly, if you're not already a Tree Sister, get yourself to treesisters.org and sign up and join what is a global movement of love and passion on behalf of the forests of our world, because we cannot survive without our forests. And right now we're losing them at a terrifying rate. It's time to start putting them back. And that requires all of us and our love and our generosity as we move back into reciprocity with the Mother who has given us everything and who can no longer go on with us just taking. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm hoping some of this is useful, and I look forward to being in relationship with as many of you as possible as Tree Sisters in the near future. Thank you.
Oh, Claire, well, thank you so much for being here and bringing all your energy and your heart and your wisdom and your passion to what we need to do in the next, 6 years before things make a huge turn. So you've given us a lot of hope in how to do that. And I appreciate what you said about Tree Sisters, because it's not just about planting trees. It's this holistic system where we can really come back into our nature and making it our second nature to give back to nature, because that is who we are. So thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And viewers, as Claire shared, you can find her and our systems at treesisters.org. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on the next call.
Thank you for joining us for Resilience and Renewal in your third act. Transform fear and claim your sovereignty in uncertain times. Brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit thirdactsummit.com. To join our global community of people awakening to their divine humanity and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for gathering with us and for sharing this empowering path with your friends and family.